Hello there and welcome to AM Prime on WESN Content Capital. I'm Keaton Shaw and thank you very much for joining us this morning. WESN and AM Prime continues with its conversations surrounding Budget 2023-2024, which is due to be read very soon. And as we get into more constructive conversations, I'm joined this morning by political analyst and consultant Derek Ramsamouj as we speak about the last fiscal year. Dr. Ramsamouj, Derek, welcome to the program. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me on your program.
Well, it certainly is a pleasure, sir. And if we are to speak about Trinidad and Tobago, which is touted as the most industrialized nation in the Caribbean, and there are issues also, many issues even associated with that. How would we measure the economy or the success or decline of the economy within the last fiscal year?
Okay, let's put this within the context of the political economy of our country. We must recall that political parties are elected, sometimes based on their manifesto and how they will manage the economy. And it's the job of the government to manage the resources of your country to improve the quality of life as much as possible for many segments and different populations in our country. When you consider what is happening in the region as well as globally, you would realize the last budget spoke about that of tenacity as well as that of stability in the global challenges. So if we were to analyze the last budget, meaning the one that we're in, save and except what happens next week, we've got to recognize whether or not the government's initiatives were bold, outside of the box from previously, as well as whether it created a level of stability notwithstanding the global challenges that we face. Mm-hmm. If you look at perhaps the quality of our life, as you mentioned, when compared to Jamaica, for example, or when considered the situation in Guyana and Suriname, where there's a beginning of an oil sector, we will then have to evaluate how stable our currency is, what the quality of our life is, how is the government using the resources to improve the average family. Let's be clear, we're going to have a lot of politics, so to speak, but the budget is about money. It's about liquidity. It's about the state being able to meet its obligations. And it's about the families being able to afford living in our society.
This word stability, which has been used quite often within the last year, and as you mentioned, it was also the theme of last year's budget when it was presented by the Minister of Finance. That is a word that, though there is a definition for it, it can also be interpreted in many ways. Stability does not necessarily mean an increase or a decline. And I often wonder, and maybe you can perhaps strengthen an argument or argue against, and that is, has there been an improvement or have we just remained stable where we're still, in a sense, trying to manage as best as possible with what we have without necessarily having the expenditures or the investments to improve the quality of life in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay, let's recognize that Trinidad and Tobago is not insular. And therefore, like the rest of the world, we've had to deal with perhaps external challenges. One, the 2-year period of COVID that affected the supply side when it comes to our products and services that we import, from simple things like food items, such as grain, such as oil, such as flour, as well as that of accessing foreign currency, because we are a consumer type society, and we like the notion of paying for brands, down to simple food brands that in other countries you will not have, as well as, let's not forget, the ongoing conflict between Ukraine and Russia and the ability to move products, basic food again, as well as technology. So we live in a part of the globe. So that is why it would be interesting to hear what the present Minister of Finance is going to say next week, as he accounts as to whether or not we have A, kept the growth rate that he projected, kept the inflation rate, which is a major issue. The inflation is broken up perhaps in 2 or 3 sectors. One, that of the food inflation. Secondly, the energy inflation. Thirdly, the import inflation, because we import all our products. Also, we are seeing the lack of US dollars becoming paramount as part of the public discussion. So how do you ensure no one is sent home? How do we ensure that there is not a high level of delinquency when it comes to mortgages? How do we ensure that the social programs are maintained? How do we ensure that we keep the stabilization and the subsidies for perhaps basic necessities like water and energy, like the internet, as the case may be? So remember, it's not a question of how much money we make and what we're getting out of it. You also have to look at the purchasing power of your currency. If you, example, look at the simple thing like the average lunch sold to our average public servant or average dweller or worker in Port of Spain, whether you're willing to pay $60 for a box lunch or whether you're willing to pay more for lunch from a burger joint, for example, or whether you wish to buy your basic food and cook it at home. So the question is having the choice, and it's the choice of the government and it's the choice of the citizen understanding what is available and not available.
Well, the government will make an argument that choice still exists. Now, options may have been reduced, given all that you have suggested. For example, given that we are a high import-reliant nation, obviously the expenditure associated there and the inflation associated there will obviously reduce our ability to purchase goods on the international market. We've heard that already from the Supermarkets Association, that the brands of which we were so accustomed to before we're not necessarily going to be seeing on our shelves. But the arguments that have been made is that options still exist. You have choice, it's just reduced as to what it was previously.
Part of it is our 60-odd years of being independent have created a taste pattern where we do not eat local, for example, if you deal with food, or you believe that because you were producing oil and gas, you have access to certain elements in our society. So the state patronage that was created by the political culture have been sustained regardless of which political party is in government, yes or no. If you look at the workfare system, whether you want to choose to call it Special Works or CPEP or URP, if you look at the way the public service is organized, if you looked at the strength of the trade unions, if you were to say, are we productive considering what we're paying when compared to our neighbors? So all of these basically, remember, part of it is no politician, no government wants to send home people. No government whose political culture of the society is so created where we expect the state to look after us. So part of the challenge, and in the coming weeks or coming days, we look at it, how different administrations, were they any different in terms of how they deal with the energy sector, for example. Our wealth creation is that of the energy sector, but we still are in a process of trying to review what are the tax concessions given, yes or no. We all have traveled from Trinidad to the different regions, we have extended family, and we expect a good quality of life. But our average citizens do not wish to pay for that good quality of life. For example, we've had come out of the local government, that of local government reform, and that of the property tax. What will occur in the coming years is, would the government be looking to restructure the tax system, thereby increasing the government's coffers so as to enhance the quality of life at the community level. And I think that's going to be where we're going to be going in the next 2 to 5 years. Citizens want more of everything, but equally they must be willing to be more responsible and pay for that. One of the challenges we're going to be seeing is everyone is going to be talking about a salary increase and want the salary increase to be on par to the inflation level. But we have to factor in what is productive and what is earning revenue for our country. Let's be clear. We pull oil and natural gas from the ground, package it, and resell it. What new are we producing?
Mm-hmm. Have we, and it ties back into what you suggested, that over the next few days we will be going in depth historically as to successive governments and what they have been able to do. But would you make an argument that there's been a government in our 60 years that has been able to evolve and meet the demands of the economy, rather than this approach that seems to be, we're going to try and manage with what we have. We're not necessarily going to push to meet the demands of the economy or meet the economic strains on society, but we're going to place ourselves in a position where there is, again, stability.
Okay, stability was critical. We saw that in the 1986 NAR administration, when they had to restructure how the economy was being managed. That resulted in a one-term government because the society was not willing to accept the economic direction that every family had to follow. We have seen in countries like Jamaica, when there is economic slides occurring when you do not make the necessary changes. But I want to add this. If you look at the quantity of wealth created by the multinational corporations or the big business in our country, we have extraordinary profits. But one of the challenges, if I were to say in the next couple of years, would be the restructuring of the financial institutions in our country. You look at the banks and the price our average family or citizens pay to access liquidity, whether we're talking about, for example, the mortgage companies or the charges the banks make. Does this government or any government have the capacity to control, to protect the citizens from sometimes the exorbitant rate of our banks, or how our financial institutions like insurance companies run, and the cost of reinsurance, for example?
Or is rather the government willing to take that approach at all? Is the government willing, not necessarily to interfere, but at least stand up to the banks? We saw something similar taking place in Barbados within recent times.
Right. And if you look at in this budget that we're now coming to an end, they spoke about the Trinidad and Tobago mortgage company of restructuring, right, the state-type mortgage institutions. And one of the interesting facts is whether or not that has been achieved. Because we expect the whole notion of construction and infrastructure and housing to drive our economy. But if the cost of money is too expensive for the basic thing like your first-time homes, it tells you where the government needs to basically position itself. And that's one of the challenges. One of the challenges is that of the basic infrastructure required, not just roads and bridges, right? And as we're talking about the digitalization, the capacity of government to provide public services in a meaningful manner very quickly. And in the coming, let us say, 3 to 7 years, we all talk about wanting to be like Singapore. We all talk of wanting to be like South Korea. But are we willing as citizens to allow the government to actually pursue those plans. And that's why, as you pointed out, we need governments that will proactive drive the economy to bring about the transformation that is needed. So it'll be interesting now that the last budget, the present budget, talk about stability. Now the question is, how do you stimulate growth, and where are you going to stimulate the growth? Where are the jobs going to come from? Because the workfare jobs are not productive, right? It's a welfare type state. So are you going to create the new sectors?
Well, Derek, I'll tell you what, let's take a break. But before we do that, I'm putting this on the table. When you come back, I'd like your response. You're asking whether or not we as the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago are willing and will be accepting of government having to implement measures such as the restructuring of certain financial sectors. But bear in mind these statistics, and statistics aren't always necessarily reflective of the truth. But when you have independent international organizations revealing such information, for example, the Open Budget Survey, which ranks the transparency or the participation and accountability of the public in a government's budget in 120 countries, rated Trinidad and Tobago as a score. This is not out of all the countries, but a score of 7 out of 100. An adequate score, according to Open Budget Survey, is 61 out of 100. And this is in relation to transparency, accountability, and public participation. That's 7 out of 100. And then when you take a look at transparency, again, a transparency score of 61 or above indicates a country is likely publishing enough material to support informed public debate on the budget. TNT ranked 34, got a score, sorry, of 34 out of 100. So you're asking very pertinent questions, but then you also have to understand the government side in pushing forward with such measures. So let's take a break, and when we return, I'll get your response on this. We'll be right back after this.
Let the home store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmore, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continue to serve you with pride. First Citizens celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
Fan Zone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Welcome back. So the question was asked before whether or not the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago will be willing to accept any sort of push or move from the government to restructure certain financial institutions or sectors, all that makes up the economy. And I laid on the table information from the Open Budget Survey, again, which measures the accountability and public participation in over 120 different countries. Trinidad and Tobago got a score of 7 out of 100 in relation to public participation and accountability. An adequate score is seen as 61 and above. And as it relates to transparency, an adequate score of 64 and above, well, in that regard, 61 and above as well, in that regard, TNT received a score of 34 out of 100. And there it comes back very much as to the two sides split down the middle in regards to any sort of change, transformation, or evolution within the economy of Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you for that comment. If I may just expand a bit on that.
Sure.
One of the challenges is how do you arrive at making certain decisions within the governance framework? The entire world is data-driven. A high part of this budget that we saw in the last year was that of digitalization. But an important subset of that was that of data. And this budget indicated that the government was actually going to they were going to focus on accumulating data and structuring data according to international standards. So the CSO data and other type of economic data, they were supposed to allocate a budget and put a structure. So when we are talking about agriculture or healthcare or education or energy or cost of living or poverty or the living conditions of our citizens, we would have sufficient data from independent sources so as to drive the economic program. I do not believe we have succeeded in basically dealing with proper census, proper living condition surveys. I do not believe we have set up the institution required with the resources, both manpower as well as technology, to provide the kind of data needed for planning. Now, that is where we have not been successful when compared to many other countries in the globe. For example, Mauritius, in the late 1950s, 1960s, created a framework for the collection of data, village by village, community by community, so you knew what type of infrastructure required, whether it's education, housing, drainage, water, electricity, by population growth rate, and then also of job creation, so you will not have people coming to the capital to work. That guided the whole allocation of resources. So to answer your question, we speak proper language. We have excellent technocrats who understand what the policies should be. Where we collapse greatly is that of actual implementation.
Another buzzword.
So if you look at the whole notion of public procurement, and the local government reform was supposed to bring public procurement into that space, and we are supposed to basically look at how we could go online and use technology for procurement and see who won the bid and who didn't win the bid, which is good and healthy. When the reality is I believe our single window for trade is now facing many challenges after a decade so of existence. So what we also have is we do not have continuity, where service providers are changed as the administration changed, and you reinvent the same wheel with the same challenges that we have. So if we're talking about the notion of stability in the global challenges, trade is also very important for us. Not just trade that where we import stuff, but where our manufacturing sector, as challenging as they may be, could be able to reach out to the CARICOM countries. And that whole arrangement within CARICOM and trade have got to be revisited.
It goes back actually to a lot of, I'm sorry to interrupt because we will expand on CARICOM in a moment. But if we're speaking about manufacturing, the manufacturing sector has performed quite well within the last year. And if you speak about the relationship between Trinidad and Tobago's manufacturing sector and CARICOM, you have a lot of these private institutions, such as the TTCSI, that are trying to push for such a great relationship, especially when it comes to trade with the rest of CARICOM. But going back to what you initially mentioned in regards to the implementation, yes, we have very good language and we know the rhetoric, but in that sense alone, is that a deliberate strategy? I can feed the information I want to feed, but I'm not necessarily going to give you all, because vision, not necessarily vision, but rather planning, could be a barrier to any government or a minister of finance doing what they want to do, rather than what should be done or needs to be done.
So that brings me to the point we were making. Unless you have true, proper data that address these issues from independent sources, because you can quote the IMF and all of those institutions, but they take secondary data as opposed to primary data collection. And that's one of the major issues in going forward. So, for example, housing, or the environment, or the notion of climate change, and the relationship between the policies, the implementation of public housing. You're looking at the carbon footprint, the biodiversity. Unless you're prepared to have a sort of independent program driving it that is accountable, not manipulated by the politician, but that is accountable, those are the things that, as any evolving society, we need to look at. So, as we began the conversation about new sectors, like, for example, the AI sector, all of that is information driven, how it is presented, how it is analyzed. And therefore, very few people, I suspect, would have read the budget front to back. What they will do is look at the highlights put forward by the politicians and arrive at a decision. So we have no shortage of good technocrats identifying what we need to do. The challenge is the implementation. So if we look at, for example, the couple of things, the tax structure in our society, whether we're dealing with the property tax or whether we're dealing with the tax relationship with the oil and gas companies, whether we're talking about the tax subsidies, whether it's water or electricity, right, or energy-related matters, those are some of the issues that we need to look at. We began to talk about that of hydrogen as a source of energy as we move the society forward, and the relationship between public-private partnerships in doing that. Have that initiative began to be successful in the implementation? Where are the bottlenecks with respect to that? And you see, part of it is if our development is stimulated by private sector determines the pace on that on the premise of the profitability of that. So you look at the whole country's development and you say, okay, we want to get into this position, let us say green energy, by basically 2050, 2030, 2040. Then private sector structures their economic plan based on profitability and when it occurs. So there is a strong relationship between government's programs and the wealth capacity of private sector to become profitable. Example, I want to go back to the financial institutions. We must recall that part of the challenges in 1970 was that of how the banks were structured and the financial institutions were structured in terms of who was employed or not employed. Now, one of the challenges we're seeing is the allocation of US dollars, and with respect to the credit cards, and the government basically influencing the bank to cut the quantum of foreign exchange John Brown citizen can get. The question is, what recourse does the citizens have? When you consider that we're paying high US dollars in fees for foreign franchises, right? For basic things like bread and meat, for food, for fast food. I'm not against business. I'm simply saying we probably need to reconsider across the board where you're asking for the sacrifice to be made, right? So in the coming months, chicken, oil, rice, flour, eggs, the cheapest form of protein, right? We cannot afford monopolistic perspectives where that is concerned.
And that begs the question, as you mentioned, people may not have read the entire budget statement by the Minister of Finance. They would have just read and not necessarily digested, but for a moment or two thought about the snippets that were presented. Do Trinbagonians, and I'm not going to speak for the wider Caribbean or any other nation, but do Trinbagonians understand what a budget is, what fiscal policy is, and what even allocations are, and as well as supplementary allocations? Do you think that the average man on the street understands that?
The only time the average man could understand that is when he feels it in his pocket. Let's be clear. The budget is about money. It's about an intent of a government to allocate money to be spent. Sometimes that does not occur. It is an intention, but because of certain circumstances in your 12-month period, that may or may not occur. So it's an intention. Secondly, not only does the government need some of those funds for service, public services to the average citizen, the other element is how much money ends up in your pocket for your monthly expenditure, and of that, from your income, how much can you save, and how much can your savings earn for you? And when you compare what the average citizen gets in earnings from savings to what the institution makes from managing those services, it's a completely different picture. And the challenge of the government is not necessarily only that of stability, but that of the equity or equality of opportunity to the average households. And it is only when, as our history shows us, when there's an economic crisis and the average man has to spend, average family have to spend more money, do they listen to what is in the budget for me? And for example, everybody will be talking about the price of petrol. At one point in time, it would be, what's the price of cigarettes? What's the price of rum? What's the price of alcohol? You know, that was the driving force. Alcohol gone up. It affects my entertainment perspective. So sometimes the politicians use the budget to maintain their dominance by playing on the psychology of the average human being in this country, what is important to them.
So let's now go a bit further into something you mentioned previously, and that is in regards to CARICOM. And over the last years, CARICOM celebrated its 50th anniversary. The 45th general meeting was held in TNT celebrating 50 years of CARICOM. All governments come together, they shake hands, yet there are still so many issues associated with CSME and the full implementation and integration of CSME. But is CARICOM and CSME now an opportunity more than ever for Trinidad and Tobago to expand in regards to trade and even in regards to exports?
One of the challenges that we face is, are we restricted by CARICOM? Are we restricted by the geopolitics in our society? The Prime Minister, at I believe his address in the UN, spoke to that of Cuba at one point in time, and Trinidad talks about the energy opportunities with respect to Venezuela. So CARICOM is very restricted. One, because it has not implemented what it was designed to implement in an effective manner. A simple thing, outside of the common external tariffs, the notion of being able to trade in each other's currency without the US intervention is one of the things that we needed to look at over the last couple of decades. So to facilitate the trade between the energy sector, the agriculture sector, the manufacturing sector, and the need for whether or not we need US dollars to facilitate trade within the CARICOM space. Also, if you look at the situation with Venezuela and the notion of the energy sector, not just only with respect to Trinidad, but also the relationship with countries like Guyana and their border disputes. We also have to look at Jamaica and its marketing capacity, and look at Belize, who is not only a member of CARICOM, but also a member of the Central America trading groups as well as the big economic opportunities that seriously exist in places like Haiti, when it comes to improving the quality of life of the average Haitians in infrastructure, in housing, in food, in telecoms, in water, in terms of just enhancing the quality of life next to Jamaica. So we need to review and revisit whether CARICOM is functional for the next 50 years.
Is that from solely the perspective of Trinidad and Tobago, whether or not we need to review over the next 50 years the benefits of CARICOM and CSME for us, rather than it being a Caribbean-centric argument or an examination?
Well, at one point in time in the world of globalization, if we looked at the European Union, that was considered a bigger trade and economic bloc. But within recent times and the politics, you find a number of countries willing to come out of that type of trading bloc. So we have to make a determination in going forward whether being part of this trading bloc as it is beneficial to the average Trinidad family, Trinidad and Tobago family, or whether or not coming out of it or restructuring the agreement must be considered. A very simple thing. In the OECS, you can travel on your driver's license, not your passport, right? So whether there are benefits to be derived, yes or no. The whole notion of certain commodities like rice and cement, how you deal with those certain kinds of commodities, or alcohol, for example. So how do you earn more revenue from your export market? And are we only interested in considering US dollars or foreign exchange as opposed to being only US dollars? The other element that we need to look at, and we began to see elements in this in all our budgets for, let us say, for the last 20 years, the role of Chinese capital and Chinese labor in the development of our infrastructure.
Belt and Road.
I could understand initially we may not have had the technology or our work productivity level. But now, after 20 odd years of getting this kind of investment, and after billions, perhaps even trillions of dollars in our economy from oil and gas, we must be able to have indigenous capital outside of the state willing to basically invest in our infrastructure. The construction sector, the infrastructure and the construction sector is one of our primary drivers. And that is why the public procurement legislation is important, so as to ensure we have the smaller construction companies benefit from any huge infrastructure work that we have. We are running out of roads to be built or places to build roads. The challenge we have is that of maintenance, right? We have a fair amount of stadiums. So we have had infrastructure development that has been stimulated by the construction sector and created jobs.
Has that also been our indicator as to economic development here in TNT?
But economic development is one element of the SDGs. The human development is what is missing. So when you consider the level of education, let's be clear, certification and education are two entirely different things. And while we still have an average level of certification from where we came from, we are nowhere when you consider Singapore and South Korea and those places, because the Asian culture is fundamentally different. Example, in South Korea, at birth, you have a social security card. At birth, right? They know where you live all your entire life. You have access to a cell phone your entire life. You cannot do any business in these countries because in a world of connectivity, right, the social security card is just as important as having a cell phone attached to you, because that's where you get all your public services. So whether we talk about TT Connect to the digitalization, again, it's just an opportunity for providers to offer services, but the actual implementation of that is what is lacking. You look at the banking community, for example, the whole notion of digital currency. You go to the UK, you cannot buy fish and chips with pound sterling in notes, right? They will take it, you have to pay for it via your cell phone.
Everything now in the UK is via your cell phone, yeah.
Right? Down to even buying a rail ticket.
Yeah.
So that also leads me to the notion of transport, because we have yet after decades to fix the transport and ferry service between the islands, right? Far less the capacity of so many cars on the road. So it's one thing to keep saying we want to be stable and we want to understand the resistance, but we need more than that now. We need the capacity not for economic growth, but for community growth.
So, okay, I hear you. And this may sound like a rather stupid question. However, in the context of the conversations that we've had this morning, what would you propose as being a suitable theme for the next fiscal year? And as you mentioned, the next 5 to 7 years are absolutely crucial, again, given the arguments presented this morning.
Let me be clear. No one could understand or predict the Minister of Finance. He is fundamentally a creature of his own making. But in saying that, I think the country look at the messenger as opposed to understand his message. So we must agree that he has done a decent job in keeping the country stable. We don't have people being dismissed, we don't have public servants, we don't have people rioting. Yes, you have the disturbances with the roads and that kind of stuff. But in terms of what he is doing for the economy and keeping the dollar stable and actually still ensuring people are working and that the allocations are being offered, whether it's used wisely is a different story. So you have to give credit where it is due. So he has kept the country on an even keel. People may look at the messenger, however, and get some annoyance with that. But for what he is trying to do and the resources he's had coming out of the COVID experience, right, coming out of the Ukraine experience, we do not have that level of suffering from a global perspective. Yes, we've had inconvenience. Yes, we've had to make an alteration to the quality of our life. I think what he's also attempting to do, bearing in mind there's a relationship between the politics and the economics, right? He's probably going to put some constraints on the society now with the view of the election budget will be the release of more resources for the election budget.
But aren't we going to see elements of an election budget from around now? This is the second to last budget before election year.
I don't think he can put that out and telegraph it. Because remember, your electorate has a 90-day mentality, right? People tend to forget what they received last year, right? And if you want to influence political decision making in 2025, they actually have to feel the benefit in 2025, not 2024. So save as much, accumulate resources to disperse during the election year. You ask what the themes or direction should be. It should be that of growth and not statistical growth, right? It must be growth at the community level. It must be where every working family must be able to not only save money, but buy the resources they need, the kind of house they need, the kind of vehicle. Again, we are driven by consumerism, right? But it's to balance the consumerism with a savings ethic, right? You have no shortage of the Gen Z population. People who were born in the year 2000 would be 25 by the time the next election comes along. So that Gen Z population have a particular need pattern that is fundamentally different from their grandfather and their grandmother and their parents. So their capacity to earn US dollars and globalizing our workforce to have clients not only in the region, not only in the Caribbean, but in the developed world as well. So being able to develop the human resource opportunity to give them the capacity to earn US dollars. What they did in the oil and gas, for example, and a number of the persons who work in our oil and gas sector went to Africa to work, went to Asia to work. We now need to understand the changing nature of work and equip that Gen Z population with the tools required to work anywhere in the world but still be in their own bedroom while doing that.
Derek, I want to thank you very much for your time this morning. It's a fitting way to start the conversations over the next a few days, next week and a half, and a lot more to come. But as we break the ice on this particular topic, thank you very much for your time, for your presence, and for expanding a bit on the conversations of which is not thoroughly explored throughout an economic calendar. Again, such as CSM, human development, certainly that is all part of it, which we don't hear too often. So thank you so much for your time.
It's my pleasure. And it's good to see young people playing their role in our society.
Well, I hope I'm setting some example. Ladies and gentlemen, you can join us again tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. With Derek Ramsmooge and guests as we continue the conversations surrounding Budget 2023-2024. We're going to take a break for WESN's news. When we return, we'll welcome our final guest for this morning. We'll be right back.
Here is the WESN News on the Hour. I am Sarah Ali. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. Phase 2 of San Fernando waterfront gears up for restoration. 18-year-old shot in Diego Martin. Mechanical issue at TCO booster station leads to water supply disruptions in South Trinidad. And internationally, Joe Biden makes history by joining Michigan picket line. Now for the details. The next phase of the San Fernando waterfront redevelopment project is poised to kick off next month. This phase will encompass the restoration of Plaza. A UDICOT team headed by its chairman, Noel Garcia, and CEO, Tamika Charles, recently met with the various contractors who will be conducting reclamation, restoration, and construction work. A small number of contractors are being engaged to complete the Bayshore housing development, which is envisioned to provide housing for the displaced squatters at the San Fernando waterfront. An 18-year-old is currently in serious condition at the Port of Spain General Hospital after being shot in Diego Martin. The incident occurred around 4:45 p.m. on Sunday along Waterwheel Road in Diego Martin, near the vicinity of Andrew Trees. The young victim was in the company of friends, casually spending time in the area, when a series of abrupt and loud gunshots rang out. Witnesses noted a speeding vehicle hastily departing from the scene. Upon further investigation, the teenager was discovered lying on the ground, suffering from multiple gunshot wounds to his upper chest. Certain areas of South Trinidad are currently facing water supply disruptions due to a mechanical problem impacting the pumps at the TCO booster station. The Water and Sewage Authority has assured the public that emergency repairs are underway and are expected to be finalized by 4 p.m. on Tuesday. In a press release issued on Monday, WASA has advised customers that it may take up to 48 hours for the water supply to fully return to normal in some of the affected areas. This disruption also includes adjustments to the water supply schedules during this period. Internationally, Joe Biden is set to join members of the United Auto Workers Union on the picket line in Michigan, a first for a sitting U.S. president. The White House has said the president will not get into negotiations, although he is expected to speak. The UAW declared a strike in November, targeting Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, pushing the three major car companies for higher pay and other improvements in a new labor contract. Biden's visit to local car workers comes a day before his main electoral rival, Donald Trump, does the same. Well, that's news to the hour on WESN. I'm Sira Ali. Thanks for watching.
We exposed 5 strangers to KFC's delicious chicken to see if any time could be KFC time. And at the first bite, the party began. We repeated the experiment during the day, during business hours, on weekends, with sunshine, with rain. And it's confirmed. KFC's flavor makes anytime KFC time. KFC, it's finger licking good.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this, screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
Join me, Sule A. Joseph, as I delve into the day-to-day psychological issues plaguing our society. We will discuss behaviors that encompass the biological influences, social pressures, and environmental factors that affect how you think, act, and feel. Sight, Thursdays at 11:30 a.m. only on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, The Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.
Hello there, and welcome back to AM Prime. Thank you for joining us this morning. Do you know what time it is? It's time for Wild Wednesdays. Guess what? Ricardo Mead is with us once more. Hello, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having us, and good morning to all our listeners and followers out there.
And we're also joined by Insaf. Hello, man, how are you?
I'm fine. Good morning, everyone.
Well, I think I'm looking forward to what you have in that bag this morning. I'm not sure it's moving around. We'll get into that for a moment, but how are things?
I can't complain. It's been a great long weekend working, doing a lot of work at the center and trying to do things a whole lot better in terms of enclosure-wise for the animals. And well, we had a lot of patients come in, but we've seen progress with a lot of them. So we're very, very buoyant and very happy about that progress.
When you say patients, what do you mean by that?
Well, our patients as a wildlife center would be various forms of local wildlife that people would have brought in or we would admit for certain reasons. So we have, as a patient, we have a green sea turtle that has the fibropapillomatosis virus, which is basically a form of turtle herpes. So it causes these massive growths all over, but it will impair the vision, its ability to eat, and so on. So we have that to go through a whole series of treatments.
That naughty turtle.
Yes, well, no, I didn't get it that way.
I know.
We have lots of baby birds. They're still fledgling. People are still picking them up. We have lots of baby manacles. We've had in the past week 4 cases of mother manitou killed by the dog, so the babies have been orphaned. So a lot of work. Yeah, it happens quite often, including one just happened this morning. Well, they didn't know exactly what happened to the mother, but they found the baby on the ground, beaten up looking, so it may not make it. So birds shot, broken wing, broken leg. We have lots of patients all the time.
Oh, crikey. And that, as I said, part of it is a love for wildlife, but even having to try and rehabilitate animals, and in instances where they're not going to make it, such as the one you found as well. That must be...
Putting animals to sleep is a sad part of it, but it's a necessary part of it. You cannot just have the animal there saying, I don't want it to die, but watch it suffer until it dies. You're supposed to do no harm, just the same oath that doctors take, the vets take. So you have to do the best that you can for the animal, not for you, not for your personal feeling or your religious or ethnic background, but for the animal. So you have to separate yourself from the decision making and do it basically by the book, what is right for the animal.
Insaf, how are you doing this morning?
I'm great, man.
It's good to see him. Thank you for joining us. What do you do at the El Socorro Center?
Well, I'm a volunteer for the past 5 years, and I basically do anything that Mr. Ricardo wants me to do concerning animals. If it's rescuing, going to people's homes, helping relocate animals. Anything that he wants me to do, I volunteer and I help.
As long as he doesn't tell you you've got to eat the mealworms, because I think last week
Yes, I'm not taking part in that.
Of course, being a volunteer and whatnot, you love what you do. You love interacting with animals.
Of
and
course.
Part of it is rescue as well. I mean, you've been able to build relationships with animals as well over the last 5 years?
I think I do better with animals than people.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, oftentimes I get that thought as well. Sometimes you realize you can sit down and talk to a dog for hours and hours, and it won't argue back. It might walk away after some time.
You're quite right.
So what do you have in that bag this morning?
Oh, well, we have a guy here named Mr. Carl.
Mr. Carl?
Yeah, C-A-L, short for Carl Cutter.
Okay, I'll tell you, hold one moment. Before you bring him out the bag, what are we dealing with? Just before you bring him out the bag, what are we dealing with this morning?
No, he's a little guy. We like to call him a little guy, a little boy. Yes, size little, plenty big. These are relative terms, value terms. It depends on the value placed on it. So he's little compared to the female, who is right now about 15 feet long and weighs about 155 pounds. So she is massive. Right? The same type of snake, she is massive. So we call him the little boy. When people say, wow, it's a big snake, we say, nah, he's the little boy. The males are usually much smaller.
I'm glad we got that out the way. It's a little snake. I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break here on the program, and when we return, we'll get the little snake on the table. I hope he really means little. Back after this.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios. But they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks. They deserve Benjamin Moore.
From Maracas Bay to Arafita Avenue and Piaco, Richard's Bake and Shark brings the world's most popular fish sandwich closer to you. Open daily at all our locations.
You gave us the inspiration to be first. We gave you the solutions that put you first. You walked with us side by side, and we continued to serve you with pride. First Citizen celebrates with you 30 years of achieving dreams, shaping success stories, and painting brighter futures together. And together, we'll accomplish so much more. First Citizens, together, 30 and beyond.
Let the Home Store turn your house into a home you love. Get everything you need to give your home that special look and feel. We offer household items, lawn and garden, paint center, hardware, plumbing, lighting and electrical, toys and storage solutions. 5 convenient locations: 6th Avenue Barataria, The Falls at Westmall, Pennywise Plaza Shoguanas, C3 Center Branch and C3 San Fernando. Check out our Facebook page for more information and come visit us today. The Home Store. Turn your house into a home you love.
Congratulations to the Nicole Lawson Live Show, which received a special mention in the Best Magazine Program category at the CBU Caribbean Media Awards in August 2023.
On the next episode of Nicole Lawson Live, living in victory every day. If you had a choice to go back and be the 18-year-old,
Nope.
But for most of us, June, we wish we had youth again, at least a little 20 years or 10 years, and you are saying, no, right where I am, this is who I want to be. You ain't going back. You don't want to go back at all. Why?
No. I don't want to be 18. I don't want to be 35. I don't want to be 50. I love being me because I see the maturity in me that I will look back at and say, you really did that? Like, really? That's the best you could have done?
Seriously?
Reduce your expenses. you must find a way to cut back on your expenses. Okay, if it means writing down your monthly expenses, you have to do that. And you need to be able to see which ones you need to cut off.
An encore of Nicole Lawson Live, living in victory every day. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. and Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. on WESN.
Okay, so they said little. Do you guys think this is little? Let's welcome Carl to the program. Carl is over there next to Steph. Hello, Carl. What little? What is he little? What? There's nothing little about this snake.
Again, it's relative. He is little and tiny compared to the female, who is twice his length almost, and
Twice his length?
yeah, and weighs 100 pounds more than him.
So what? He's
She's
about
massive.
7 feet.
Well, actually, I don't
Yeah,
know,
he looks a
actually
bit bigger
Yeah,
than 7 feet.
yeah, he's probably hitting 10 easily right now.
Yeah.
I haven't measured him in a while.
Is he gonna get bigger than this?
Yeah, he'll put on a little more length there to it there, but not too much bigger. The males don't get that much girth to them. The females do. They're the ones who have to produce up to 50 eggs, sometimes even 60, and incubate them. So they have a massive body to be able to accommodate.
Do all those eggs usually survive though?
I think the normal hatch rate is about 75 to 80%.
Okay, okay. He seems to be having fun with stuff. He wants to just spend more time with his best friend.
Yeah, he's
everybody
just
across
moving
there.
around and so on like that there.
So tell us a bit more about Carl. Carl is just shed because his skin is absolutely
Yeah,
silky,
it's just, yeah, it's
The
an
scales,
amazing
yeah.
time when you feel them like this.
Oh,
They after the
yeah.
shed, post-shed, they
Wow.
are silky, really smooth.
Very-
There's no slime. And people are like, I don't like snakes, they're slimy. People, there.
You might be seeing
no
my
slime,
laptop.
see? No
None,
slime
none at
whatsoever.
all.
Yeah, snakes are not slimy. I mean, if you wet anything, then it becomes slimy. So what this is an albino version of the Burmese python. The Burmese python is from Far East Asia, mainly from Burma, now called Myanmar, and then when you have a coup, it'll be Burma again. But it's from that region and in Southeast Asia, and they are in the top 5 of the largest snakes in the world. So they can get about 23, 24 feet quite easily and be pretty heavy.
Very muscular.
So they're very, very storied right now because they're invasive in Florida. Throughout the Everglades, which is a very delicate ecosystem, they have large pythons devastating their local wildlife, and they're very much concerned about that. They're even devastating some of the local animals. You come home one evening, your dog's missing, snake probably had it. So it's a very tricky situation, volatile situation in Florida. So they have some people coming from Burma and India to help them to hunt these specimens, and they're using all sorts of methods to hunt them. And people would have blamed pet owners for releasing these snakes, but the science has shown that that is not true. What happened is Florida is home or a landing spot or a breeding spot for lots of exotic animals that are distributed throughout the US. So they had breeding facilities that had large snakes that were of breeding size, and some of them were actually gravid. That means they were full of eggs. And quite a few years ago, I don't know if it was Hurricane Andrew, but one of the big hurricanes that hit Florida destroyed these facilities in Florida. So the snakes were released into the wild. People didn't actually go and release them. And with the release of these large females that were breeding size and full of eggs, they went out there and they started breeding. And now it's an explosion of these snakes throughout South Florida, and they're moving further north in the Florida region. So they're considered invasive, and people do hunt them, but they don't kill them. They're encouraged to capture them alive and report it to the authorities, 1-800-I-GOT-1, and they will come and they will take the snakes and they will do tests on it and so on, do the DNA testing, because they need to know what's going on. And because of that DNA testing, they were able to tell that these snakes came from those original snakes that were in this breeding facility. In '86, this snake was invented. So this is invented. This is the albino version to the Burmese. The Burmese sort of looks like a mackerel. It has similar sort of brownish colors, but they created this albino version. So albinism occurs naturally throughout nature. 1 every 250,000 birds is an albino in any animal. And it's usually a recessive gene, so you get a sort of throwback. But they were able to manipulate the genes to go from recessive to dominant. So anytime this snake produces offspring, you will get albino babies.
Wow. How did, where was Carl? Where did Carl come from?
Well, Carl is short for Carl Cutter. Carl was someone's pet who escaped and was found one night in the street heading towards a poultry depot. Yes, Carl was like, my belly real grumbling, I need to get some chicken. And instead of going to KFC, he went to the chicken depot because, of course, they eat it live and raw. So he was actually captured. The police were called in. You know, one of the guys was threatening to shoot it, and somebody says, no, 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 that's somebody's pet. You can't shoot it. You can take it to the wildlife center. And so they brought it to us, and Carl has been with us ever since. And because of his size, he has overtaken our original snake as the main go-to ambassador to take out. She is just too big, too heavy. I need so much manpower to move her around. It's backbreaking.
160 pounds.
Yeah. So because Carl is just naturally going to be smaller, he's a lot easier to handle.
Now, comparatively, because I know in the serpent wool, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes the females are bigger than the males. Is that the only way you can tell if a snake is female or male? Because in other words, how can you tell?
Well, there are ways. The size is one, but one way you can tell with pythons and boas is looking by the cloaca. The cloaca is the exit of the snake. That's where all the reproductive functions take place, as well as urates and fecal matter passes. So you see these two brown spots here. These are called spurs. The males have very prominent spurs. The females are almost invisible. This is actually, say, it's like a hook. Right, like a hook, almost like a horn. There it is. And what that is that it is actually the remnant from when snakes had feet. Yes, from when snakes had feet. Let's see if we can get it around.
Snakes
easier
had
for the
feet.
camera.
Let's
right
bring
there.
Carl a bit more.
Right. So that right there, the spurs, there's 1, 2, and he actually used this when copulation. He would help to sort of move them a bit and, you know, tell the girl, hey babes, you know, hey, how you going? You know, I'm a cool guy and stuff like that there. So that's one of the easy ways of telling a male from a female in the pythons and in the boas. Wow. Quite easily. It's just so prominent. If you look at the female, it would probably be clear and tiny. You'd have to really look. I think she has something there. But in the guy, you can see that from a mile away. That's a guy. So it comes like a mammal with his hanging sort of thing there. Easy to tell.
Insaf, you've been handling Carl there on that end. Carl is very much exploratory this morning. But Carl seems so calm around you. Carl seems, he's like he's just going towards you all the time. He doesn't want to go anywhere else.
Yeah, I think he has a special liking for me.
But you have a special liking for Carl as well?
Of course, yeah.
Serpents are what, your favorite?
Yes, they are.
And how do you handle them? Do you ever had a fear for snakes to begin with?
No, I just be hopeful that they don't bite me.
I think we all are hopeful. But then, Saf, tell us even in regards to like feeding Carl.
Feeding? Well, normally a snake this size eats something large, right? And normally we give him like a large duck or 2 big chickens, and that lasts him for about 3 weeks.
Really?
Yeah. So we try to feed him like every month or so.
So okay. Well, that's right. And what about in regards to, because he just shed, but in mating, is it like a mating season or?
I'm not sure about the mating season. Mr. Ricardo here can.
Well, we have no concern about the mating season because we have no intentions of putting the snakes together. There's no intentions of breeding these snakes. And for a simple reason. One, it is not native to Trinidad. This is not going to be found naturally in Trinidad. It's actually a little bit big for our ecosystem. Of note, we have the anaconda, which is naturally found here, but that's an aquatic type snake. We do not believe that this snake should be in the hands of regular people. Leave it for the professionals. You'll hear me say that many times because a lot of things there should really be left. It can be quite dangerous. And that thing, and let's clear this up once and for all because so many people come to me and I just shake my head and say, They read this story on the internet about this lady who had a python and then one day it stopped eating and it was laying down next to her. So she went to the vet and the vet told her, well, it stopped eating and it's laying down next to you because it's sizing you up to eat you. That and some gobar can be put in the same category. You can go and plant okra with that. It's not true. Okay? This snake is bigger than me. This snake is about close to 10 feet. It's much bigger than me. There's no way this snake can begin to even dream of eating me. Okay? So that's just not, snake don't do that. They don't size up anything. They would look and they would see the hicks and determine if I'm going to go for that or not. So that is not, but it has been on the internet for the past, I think, about 17 years. And it just keeps going. And every time we go to display, someone comes up and says that story. And I just said, okay, it doesn't work like that. That's a story. That's not true.
So part of all of this, and part of all of what we're doing here, let's bring Carl around a bit more. I'm missing Carl, actually, on my end. But in that sense, part of all what we're doing here, what we're trying to achieve. Hello, Carl. Good morning. Welcome you. You're not sizing me up. We just got that disinformation out. It's actually trying to you know, stop this disinformation that is being shared and misinformation.
Yeah. And once things get on the internet like that, it's shared and somebody's like, oh my gosh. And I tell you, there is no display that we have ever gone to with the snake that someone hasn't come up to us and told us that story. It just is not true at all. This snake eats chickens. Chickens.
So let's speak about eating one more time, because I know, I think we all have a fair idea of how boas work. They're non-venomous. They actually, you know, constrict. So they suffocate their prey by using the musk. Because if you feel Carl is bloody muscular. But what about even hooking onto prey? Is there like special teeth inside?
Yeah, they have lots of teeth all pointing backwards. So if something is trying to get away and they grab into them, and the more the animal pull it, the more the teeth goes in and gives that grip. So after the grip, then it would do something called throwing coils around it. So it has the animal bitten and held, and then it would wrap its body around it, because it uses its muscular body now to do the constriction. So even though it's a python, it does constrict the same way a boa constrictor does. And the way it really works is that, imagine you're laying on the ground and someone comes and sits on your chest. You wouldn't die, but it becomes harder to breathe. Now if someone sits on that person, sits on your chest, now you have two people sitting there, it's even more difficult. And by the time a third person sits, your air passages, your respiratory system would be so constricted that your body would shut down and you would die. So it's the same way. They don't actually crush the prey to death. I mean, that can happen with the bigger snakes like this if the prey is small enough, but it's by constriction. By constricting the respiratory system, it shuts down, the blood pressure goes high, and it just shuts down. And when it's determined that the prey is dead, it would release it and maneuver from the head and swallow it. So here's a reason why snakes hardly eat people, even though they are large. The snake would stretch its jaw. They don't unhinge the jaw. They just sort of stretch. It's very flexible. So it stretch the jaw, and it would go for our heads first.
Stretch
so after
dislocate or just?
No, not dislocate. It just is very, very, very malleable. So it goes over our head. So the mouth comes over and eats our head, and then it sort of closes back in. The problem with them is now they have to try to re-stretch to get our shoulders. So our shoulders are the main reason why snakes don't usually go for people. Now they can, and they have eaten small people and with large snakes, large reticulated pythons and so on. But it's not a normal food for them at all. It's a lot of effort, a lot of problems, right? Somebody like you and me, look, our shoulders broad. The snake is going to be unable to do that. So unless it's probably one of the most, massive specimens ever recorded to be able to do something like that. So for example, they found a human in an anaconda in Brazil.
Yes.
They killed it and they cut it open and they found a human. It's like, oh my gosh, these terrible snakes killing people. When they did the autopsy as required by law, they found 9mm slugs in the person. So you think the snake was packing a 9s and shoot the man and then eat him? No, someone shot that person, and it was a small native person, and threw the body into the swamp, and the snake was like, I could take down that little guy.
Yeah.
It's free food.
So again, all that is part of it, because I've seen those stories circulating. All I know, they found the body of a snake inside of, of a man inside of a snake. Snake kills man and devours it. But also, the flickering of that tongue.
That's him, like us, looking around. What's going on? Where am I? Right? They're sensing and tasting the air and figuring out what's going on.
Okay. Hello. In stuff, in regard to feeding, is it live feeding that you guys do? Live feeding.
Yeah.
So you guys would place the chicken or the ducks in the enclosure, and he would just do everything else.
Yeah, we try to keep it as natural as possible.
Well, that is excellent. But this is, as you said, not native to Trinidad, so there are no plans to release Carl.
Absolutely not. In fact, he was saved from being released, as it were. That's another reason. Like I said, there's a reason we have no intentions of breeding them. Normal people cannot handle this animal in terms of feeding it, housing it, and possibly socializing it so that it does not become, I'll bring it back a little bit, so that he does not become a problem, a menace to them or their family. Because it can possibly grab a small child, and while it may not try to eat him, it can hurt. It can hurt the child or the owner, as it were. So to prevent situations like that, leave it for the professionals. This is too much snake for most people who like snakes to handle. It really takes a lot of effort.
I think he likes me.
Right? Yeah, you're just going to keep moving and coming towards you. The warmth that probably is coming off of the laptop and so on there. He's just going to keep moving around.
Good call. He's just having fun this morning, guys. Sometimes I think to myself, I would love to have a snake as a pet. I like snakes.
Right.
But as you just mentioned, in many instances, just leave it up to the professionals. Let's do the handling.
Responsibility. You have to be responsible. Okay, I would love to have a lion as a pet. Does it make any sense, really? No. I can tell you one thing. I can, for sure, they smell awful. I'm telling you.
Lions?
They smell awful. Most of the big cats, they smell. We have ocelots and they smell awful. So imagine something that is a few hundred pounds, you know, and their natural odors and with the mane. No. Leave it for the professionals, the proper institutions who can handle them and provide for them the space that they require. You know, imagine somebody with this in an apartment in New York, a lion and a tiger. You know, it has been done, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy.
You also, what you do is that you help people overcome a fear.
Well, that's if they up to it. Because some people think they're not afraid of snakes, and when they actually see the snake in front of them, yeah, that fear comes right back to them. But what they tend to do, they end up respecting the snake, you know.
Respecting. I like how you phrase that, actually, respecting the snake. Because, yeah, you're right. Is it that people, I know some people say, okay, could you put the snake around my neck? I want to take a photo. And then there's just people say, no, I'll just touch it. I'll just touch the end of the snake or whatnot. So surely also as well, that level of respect, you as a handler and as a volunteer in your relationship with animals, certainly when you're able to say, all right, okay, helping this person overcome their fear, they put it around their neck, that does a lot for you as well.
Well, yeah, because sometimes like they react in the wrong way, they scream, they move kind of aggressively around them, and that might
startle the snake as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you see, the thing is, I relate so much to Insaf when he says, I think I have a better relationship with animals than with people. I absolutely love animals, not so much for insects. So yesterday when you said it was a surprise, I'm like, I hope he's not bringing what I think he's going to bring.
One day, what we'll let you know, we won't surprise.
No, not one day. We're good. We're good.
Come on, it's Wild Wednesday. We're going to get wild on this show. And this is only the beginning. This is only the beginning.
So from next week, Wednesday as well, you can join Ricardo, me and volunteers of the El Socorro Center for Wildlife Conservation right here on AM Prime for Wild Wednesdays. Guys, thank you very much for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having us, and thank you on behalf of Carl and all our wild friends out there. Next week is going to be special. Next week, Wednesday, is World Animal Day.
Oh, how fitting.
How fitting. So we're going to get really wild. We're going to get something really special next week, Wednesday, for viewers, listeners out there. World Animal Day for Wild Wednesday.
Something special. I can't wait for that. Insaf, a pleasure meeting you, my friend. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me as well.
And thanks for bringing Carl. Carl, it's a pleasure meeting you. It's good seeing you. Look at those eyes. They're absolutely beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Mead, looking forward to next week.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much. And again, for your followers, friends, audience out there, you can follow us on social media, ECWC_TT. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Threads. We're out there, and we have our website, Wildlife Rescue TT. We had someone call us from California again on Sunday because she Googled wildlife rescue in Trinidad, and we came up and she called us to report there were some dead seals in Trinidad. But Trinidad, California.
Wow.
So they always shock when I tell them they reach the Caribbean. They're like, what?
Goodbye, Carl. We'll see you again very soon, buddy. Take care. You can say goodbye to the cameras over there. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Keaton Shaw. It's been my pleasure wishing you a good day ahead, a productive day. And we'll see you again tomorrow morning from 6 a.m. Until then, keep well.
WESN
I am Rondell Donowa, and you are watching WESN, the content capital.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you do in our country.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the right and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this is screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
The issue, the continued rise in the price of flour and its impact on the cost of living in Trinidad and Tobago. How should we go about it? I want to ask you what has been revealed to you about the state of vulnerability in the country because of this exercise and because of what we're going through. Is the government losing the war on the vaccine front?
The discussion should revolve around the common good for the greatest number of people in Trinidad and Tobago.
How do we inculcate a sense of respect and regard for people who may not be of your own political ilk or persuasion?
The communities are now being used by political opportunists. So
when the tables are turned, it's the same way. Okay, this has been 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson, and we'll see you next time.
I am Rondell Donowa, attorney at law and host of Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Strictly Legal is a legal program geared towards informing you, the public, of your legal rights, responsibilities, and remedies. So be viewing Thursdays 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
energy. Now, as the Wall Street Journal points out, this is all the more important for Trump because in 2016, he had a level of support for union members that no Republican had reached since the times of Ronald Reagan. That helped him win critical states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin as well. Now, with this in mind, to finish, the former U.S. Labor Secretary writes in The Guardian today that Joe Biden needs to do more than just show up at the picket line if he wants to keep and even grow his working class support. The column argues that he needs to openly criticize the CEOs of big corporations for raking in astronomical profits compared to what their average employees make. They need to bust monopolies, and Joe Biden needs to condemn firms that use their profits to, quote, buy back stocks, pollute the planet, and pollute democracy with big money.
Don't forget, you can catch our press review and its podcast on our website, the address france24.com. Now, in Canada, the Speaker of Parliament is stepping down in disgrace. Anthony Rota's announcement comes just a few days after he publicly praised an ex-Ukrainian soldier in Parliament, a soldier who also was a Nazi soldier in World War II. Jean-Emile Jamin has the story.
President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine.
It should have been a simple process for Canada's Prime Minister. Last weekend, Justin Trudeau welcomed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to speak at his country's parliament. A useful way to gain political favor then, given that Canada hosts the largest Ukrainian diaspora after Russia. But all hell broke loose when the Speaker of the House of Commons paid tribute to an old man in the audience, a Canadian of Ukrainian origin.
His name is Yaroslav Hunka. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service. Thank you.
At first, the announcement led to 2 standing ovations, but there was one problem. This particular acclaimed veteran turned out to be a former SS man. While Yaroslav Hunka did indeed fight in a Ukrainian division in the Second World War, he did so under Nazi Germany command. In light of the scandal, the Speaker announced his resignation on Tuesday.
That public recognition has caused pain to individuals and communities, including the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, in addition to survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other nations. I accept full responsibility for my actions.
Anthony Rota has insisted he had no knowledge of the 98-year-old's past, but his mistake turned Justin Trudeau's media operation into a fiasco.
6 young people from Portugal are presenting a climate case before the European Court of Human Rights today. Now, if they're successful, 32 states could be legally required to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. But first, the court will need to decide whether or not to even accept the case. Kemi Knight explains.
These siblings from Portugal are taking 32 countries to court. They're part of a group of climate activists aged 11 to 24 who are finally presenting a landmark case before the European Court of Human Rights, accusing states of failing to do enough to protect them from climate change. Sophia was only 12 when she decided to take action.
What I feel most is frustration in the face of the inaction of governments. They say it's a secondary concern instead of making it a priority. Protecting the planet is as important as protecting the economy. It's all linked.
The move was sparked by the wildfires that devastated Portugal in the summer of 2017, killing more than 100 people. The 6 young activists accuse the 27 European member states, as well as Russia, Turkey, Switzerland, Norway and the UK, of not sufficiently limiting their greenhouse gas emissions, and that the consequences are affecting their living conditions and health.
There has been cases taken by young people about climate change in other courts around the world before, but this is the first case to be filed with the European Court of Human Rights, and it's the first case to be heard by the court relating to the rights of young people. All they want is governments to do what is necessary to safeguard their futures.
More than 80 lawyers are expected in court to represent the accused countries. But before looking at the case itself, the court will need to decide on whether it's admissible. Climate litigation has been growing in recent years, both in Europe and beyond. Currently, about 3,000 climate-related lawsuits against governments or companies are underway.
Next now to Iraq, where a wedding celebration ended in disaster. More than 100 people were killed and 150 injured when a fire broke out in a packed wedding hall in the north. Lina Malera is joining me now live from Baghdad for the latest on this story. Lina, what more can you tell us?
The Interior Ministry just released a statement saying that they have arrested several employees at this wedding venue and saying that the main reasons behind this fire is a lack of security measures and also the fact that the venue was built with highly flammable materials that made it very easily catch fire. And that is an endemic problem in Iraq, the lack of safety measures and the fact that construction is being done without any measures whatsoever often.
Lina, tell us a bit more about what the government has been saying about this tragedy.
And the government has started an investigation and also said that there will be 3 days of mourning now. So they have looked into, they will look into what actually caused it, but also said that they will look into the safety measures. And it's important to say that this is not the first time there is a deadly fire in Iraq. Over the years, we have seen fire after fire in places such as hospitals where there haven't even been basic things like fire extinguishers. So there is a huge lack of safety measures, and this is not being respected at all due to the endemic corruption and mismanagement in the country.
Lina, can you tell us a bit more about this region in northern Iraq where this fire happened? Is the corruption worse there?
No, I mean, these kind of fires have been taking place all over the country, from south to north. We had in Nasiriyah 2 years ago a deadly fire with over 90 dead. We have seen also in the north. This is a predominantly Christian area outside of Mosul, Karakosh, where most of the remaining Christians in Iraq live. But that has not a connection to the causes of this tragedy.
All right, Lina, thank you so much. Lina Malera is speaking to me there live from Baghdad. North Korea has decided to expel U.S. soldier Travis King. That's from the KCNA state news agency. King reportedly bolted through the heavily armed inter-Korean border in July while on a tour of the southern side of an inter-Korean truce village. In the U.S., screenwriters have made a tentative deal with studios that could put an end to 5 months of a strike that shut down production in Hollywood. The deal calls for improved minimum pay, increased streaming residuals, and assurances that artificial intelligence cannot be used to undermine a writer's credit.
So our strike is over, but the battle goes on until the actors get their deal. We would not have gotten the deal that we have gotten if it weren't for the support of the actors.
The news about WGA is really exciting. It just means that we're hopefully going to get a strong deal as well. We don't know anything conclusive yet about what that deal is going to look like, but the stronger their deal is, the faster this will hopefully wrap up, and the stronger our deal will be as well.
We'll head now to Benin, a country that has seen a surge in terrorist activities in recent years. They began in 2019 with the kidnapping of 2 French citizens and the murder of their guide in an animal reserve. Benin launched a large-scale anti-terrorism operation last year. Our reporters followed one of the army units in the country's northern borders.
A few hundred meters away is the border into Burkina Faso, an area controlled by various armed groups. The Beninese military have had to move into the area, ready to push back any potential invasion.
We have a lot of military units all over the place to cover our area of operation. This is how we keep the Pendjari National Park secure.
Gangs have been using WAP, West Africa's largest wildlife park complex, as a trade route. This area, larger than Belgium, is spread out across Benin, Burkina Faso, and Niger. It has been closed to civilians since the start of 2022. Fuel and livestock are transported through this route, and later exchanged for weapons in Nigeria. This road under construction leading to Burkina Faso is off limits. Trespassers risked being shot by the Beninese military.
The terrorists rule the border and prevent trade. Everything's been blocked. They come and harass us with their motorcycles.
The military has deployed nearly 3,000 soldiers in northern Benin. A dozen advanced operational bases and strongholds are currently under construction, with 60% of the armed forces expected to be stationed there within the next 2 years. Puma helicopters and aircrafts monitor vulnerable areas along the country's border. Experienced in fighting drug trafficking, these South American pilots use long-range cameras to identify threats.
We don't have surface missiles, but we do have trained shooters on board to provide air support as soon as the need arises in the field.
In March of this year, a patrol team killed 7 jihadist fighters affiliated with the Islamic State, who were trying to set up a terrorist cell in W Park.
This is new because we thought it was the Al-Qaeda-linked JNIM group. The maps, Islamic militant flags, these signs show us that it's not just them, but also other related groups that want to set up shop to carry out their missions.
While soldiers search the parks for terrorists, rangers ensure that nearby communities still have access to its resources. Depriving locals of this land would create resentment, which terror groups would be quick to capitalize on.
If the park director's not there, I call the lieutenant. I tell him I need such and such a thing. He tells me to wait. After 3 days, he calls me to tell me to come.
People depend on natural resources. So if you don't take action to ensure that resources are available and shared fairly between communities and the state, then conflicts arise. Terrorism can thrive in these difficult situations.
Winning hearts and minds is key in curbing the influence of groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. Locals are encouraged to report any suspicious behavior.
It is possible that there might be internal recruitment, and our mission is to prevent that. As soon as we have information, we proceed with arrests to prevent these groups from establishing themselves on Benin's territory.
We arrested 2 suspects who came to recruit young people with a lot of money. We reported them to the military and they were arrested. God knows, maybe Burkina, because they're everywhere over there.
As a result of their cooperation with the authorities, civilians in the north are paying a heavy price. They live with the constant threat of retaliatory killings and improvised anti-personnel mines. Farmers from some areas are afraid to leave their homes. Last May, 15 civilians in the Keru and Bani Koara municipalities were killed by unidentified gunmen.
The roads are full of danger, but we're cautious.
They plant mines, and our people step on them when they go to the fields. Some got killed, others were injured, and they're currently in hospital.
The village of Kurukualu is claimed by both Benin and Burkina Faso. Up until recently, it was under jihadist control, serving as a logistics and supply base. It has now become a symbol of Benin's fight against terrorism.
Nadia Massey is up next with more live from Paris. And at 15 past the hour, your movie update. You'll get a look at Dogman, the film that's meant to be director Luc Besson's comeback after a French court dismissed rape allegations against him. Stay with us.
These inspections are frequent at the US-Mexican border. 50 times more powerful than heroin, fentanyl is the most dangerous opioid ever.
Like 3 times a day. I would smoke more, but I've heard of people overdosing the first time they ever do it.
Easy to make and easy to transport, fentanyl is a financial jackpot for Mexican cartels and a nightmare for US authorities.
Que se expandió como una pandemia. O sea, empezó a haber gente muerta por eso. Se produce que millones de pastillas diarias, millones de pastillas diarias. Y es algo que es imposible detenerlo.
Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.